Hello and welcome back to another Infinity Train rambling review. Today we're taking a look at the Mega Maze Car episode. I really enjoyed this episode, and I had two both positive but quite different reactions to it the two times that I've seen this. So the first time I watched it straight after I recorded the last one, which is a couple of days ago now, and I was just like, what a great, fun, rompy way to tackle which I'd totally forgotten about, the villains that the sort of antagonists they'd been building up, which, by the way, they did a genius job of that, because what they did was they spent two of the really early episodes, I think, teasing the idea that villains we're gonna gather and follow them through the cars, and then they didn't do any more teasers like that. They could have done, when they got out of the pig baby car, they could have shown Judge Morpho and the Parker peeps showing up and being like, I see you've been wronged by Kez too, but they didn't. They left it. They gave you the one, which is obviously the Parker people showing up with Judge Morpho, and then you can just sort of assume the rest, but it sort of lulls you into a false sense of security, because I'd kind of forgotten that was happening. If I'm honest, enough episodes had passed. Now, maybe if you watch these in bulk, as most people I think did, I think a lot of people binged these, then it's not going to be far from your mind, and it probably wouldn't have been much of a surprise to you. But doing it the way I've done it, where it's been so far across basically a week that I've watched all these episodes, just under, I think. Yeah, I'm like 5 or 6 days into my viewing of this, but maybe more. I can't remember. But anyway, it's that's really interesting. Like that's ended up being quite interesting for me. Like, because it just caught me off guard. But then it was just like such a fun romp episode. Just like deal with that. Which, by the way, pacing wise for a whole series, kind of perfect, because I kind of want the end beat to be the character stuff, the emotional stuff. So you want to get the silly, rompy, fun comedy elements. Sort of like, if you're going to wrap up that plot, like, this is the episode to do it in. So then you're freer to tackle the character stuff and the drama in the next two episodes. One thing I have criticized this show for in the past, and particularly I think this is true of season 2, was rushing the endings a little bit, where they've, it's almost like they sometimes would need like maybe 12 episodes, because they want to do a certain number of like adventures in cars, which is exactly what the show should be, and I'm on board for that. But then you do a certain number of those, and then you leave yourself less time to actually sort of like give your characters closure. Like, I remember feeling particularly that the ending of series 2 felt a little rushed at the time. Nothing crazy, but like that was certainly something I commented on. So with this season, I don't feel like that's going to be the case at all. I don't think that can be the case now, because we've gotten one element of it out of the way, which is the group of villains. And my first reaction to this episode was just like, what a fun, insane episode this was. Just chaos, absolute, like, just all these villains showing up, almost taking each other out. It was funny, it was kind of glorious, and then it has the ending, which we'll fucking get to. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but that's we'll talk about the ending of this episode. My cat's meowing to get in. I'm gonna have to let him in. He's been out. He will always choose to come back in while I'm recording the podcast, not before, even though I whistled for him before we started to avoid this exact situation. 1 second, guys. Okay, so I just thought like it was super fun, really funny, great jokes, great execution, and a really fun way to sort of end these villains. Like, well, let's talk about the villains in general and how clever the use of them is here. Having them all teamed up is good. Kind of, like I said, would have been expected if I hadn't been watching these so staggered, but was still kind of expecting. I think even in the episode where we teased the Parker people meeting up with Judge Morpho, I sort of said, oh, they'll collect as they go. So it's kind of predictable to a certain degree, even if I've I'd forgotten in the meantime. The way they use them here is great, though. They play off each other really well. They have this great idea of pig baby becoming pig toddler, because the Parker people have the device that can sort of shift you forward in time. So they've sort of evolved him into pig toddler so he can walk, which is allow them to travel through the cars fast. That's genius. Although the physics of him getting through the doors, I have questions, but we'll we're just gonna brush over that. That's fine, because it's just silly and fun, and I'm okay with that. They set up him hearing the word butterfly to describe Judge Morpho and being like, buttery fly, which you just know the second he says that how this is ending, and it's in tragedy. They actually end in quite gruesome ways. Like, the Parker people get squished by Pig Toddler trying to squish Min and Ryan. Then he eats Judge Morpho because he thinks she's made of butter, and it's all a reaction. Or maybe he is trying to squish the. Actually, you know what? Now I'm thinking about it. Maybe he is trying to squish the Parker people because the creamer, his friend, guardian, guide, who knows, is they use the thing to shift her into her final state, which is because she's made of milk. She turns into like. Actually, I should have freeze framed that and had a look at what she turns into, because it's quite creative. It's like milk. It's like cheese and butter and the sort of things you might turn milk into. Oh yeah, there we go. I've got the shut up now. Mute my laptop so I don't play any sounds. Oh, here we go. Yeah, they put it on the cream, and she turns into. It looks like. Oh, meat because she's a cow. Like a steak because she's a cow. Yeah, it is the Parker people that do it. Yeah, she's meat, eggs. Why is she an egg? I don't know. Cheese, milk, and then a bowl of, I don't know what that is, like ice cream maybe. Yeah. So it looks like the Parker people are trying to put that on Ryan and Min and teach them a lesson, and they dodge, and that's how they get the creamer. And then Pig Baby in response squishes them, and then that's a brutal end for the Parker people. Which are also used creatively in this episode because they keep attaching that thing to themselves and dialing it and turning themselves into some of the designs we've already seen. Like a great use of existing designs, pretty clever thing for a villain to do. Like, yeah, I'm on board. And then of course the bouncer, which is just the funniest thing. Like how good is the bouncer? Like he's there and you're sort of like, why? And they're like, oh, he lost his job because of you guys. He's a single parent with 14 kids. Then at the end of the episode, when they've all been fighting, and you're thinking, where's the bouncer? He can like squish things with his bare hands. We've seen him do that. And then they get to the end of the maze and he's just setting up a little rope doing his bouncer thing because that's all he knows. Which in itself is adorable. They tell him they're the band, and it works again. And what I love about this is the very subtle, as they walk past him, he sort of, you can tell he kind of realizes that he's done it again, and he sort of like hangs his head, which is just tragic. It's quite subtle, but it's really good. So basically, I had a blast with this episode of the first viewing. I thought it was fun, action-packed, like really creative, a good way for all these villains to basically end up taking each other out. Nothing wrong with a simple maze as a sort of puzzle for the car for them to solve, because then I get my second viewing, which is a lot more focused on Min and Ryan. And it is really an episode of two halves, and I don't think I noticed this watching it the first time either. It all blends really nice, but in actuality, like when you actually break down like with this script, it's like 5 minutes of Ryan and Min dealing with their stuff, 5 minutes of chaos. It's really split down the middle, and it's like two different episodes strapped together. When I watched it on initial viewing, I did not feel that though, and I don't even think I really felt that on my second viewing. I think just viewing it with an eye to be critiquing, to be reviewing, made me think about the structure of this episode, and because I try not to have that reviewy head on when I watch it the first time, which is why the impression I came away with was just what fun. Like, that was just glorious in many ways. The second viewing though, I was taking in more like that sort of stuff, and the structure I did notice was very like split down the middle, which again didn't occur to me on my initial viewing as a problem. And to be honest, it wasn't as a problem even in my second viewing. Again, just something I kind of observed about it. So I guess on paper it maybe even shouldn't work as well as it does, because it is really a story of two halves. So for those who don't remember, which is becoming my catchphrase on this damn podcast, in case anyone listens to this in the future, Ryan and Min, this is the one where they reach the car where Kez lives, and her roommate Morgan is excited to see them, and she points off into the distance at this building, which you'll remember is the building from the picture that her and Morgan were stood in front of in a previous episode, in the West car, the old West car thing. We'll come back to it. Cheeky, very clever, but we'll come back to that. And they head through the maze, and before all the villains catch up to them and it turns into chaos, there's a few minutes of what takes up the bulk of my notes, which is Min and Ryan discussing their feelings, and it's pretty complicated because we were left them in a pretty bad place in the last one. Min's pretty upset with Ryan at the start of this one, although I will say he's on speaking terms with him again extremely quickly. I guess that's just to move things along, but it did that is my, I guess, the closest thing to a criticism I have of this episode. That did jar a little bit, that he was like, shoved his hand off him and walked away, and then a few minutes later they're like talking about Ryan's oeuvre. But yeah, the basic premise of the episode, for those who don't remember, is they go through the maze, they get interrupted by all the chaos, and then they reach the sort of castle-y building in the center to meet Morgan. So yeah, that discussion they have in the car, in the maze, sorry, while they're walking around, free of Kez, because Kez has been a great mediator for the two of them, but she's also been a bit of a distraction in places, I think, where they've like wanted to be talking about their feelings, and she's kind of intentionally been prodding, and like not prodding, but like being like, "Don't worry about it; it'll all work itself out. It's cool." That's been her reaction, and the more I think about it, the more I go, maybe she's been trying to get them to not solve their problems for even longer than I thought, because I mentioned in the last one that I picked up on her dialogue where she started giving Ryan some legit advice and then decided not to. Maybe she's been hampering them from minute one, like deliberately, because she wants to keep them around, which would be quite clever, I think, and would really fit with her character. And it would also explain a lot of her sort of abstract ways of explaining things. Like, basically, she's been creating scenarios to, like, distract and sort of, like, cause problems so that will, like, generate disagreements between the two. It's certainly possible that she's been maybe more manipulative than it seems. I don't know if that's for sure where they're going to go with it, but it's certainly, there's enough groundwork that I've spotted laid to make that function, so they might go that route. But she's kind of not present much this episode, for their discussion, I should say, because she's above them, floating, so that she can guide them through the maze. And they have this really interesting conversation that kind of, again, shows so many innate contradictions, but like it feels so very real. Min sort of admitting that Ryan gets to do things and his life is fun, and almost wishing he could be a little more Ryan. But Ryan feels like he needs Min. He needs that. Ryan's sort of saying the same thing. He doesn't say it as directly as Min does, but he basically says, yeah, that's why I tried to get you to come to New York, because my solo career has been so successful. Like, I feel like Min kind of needs Ryan to get him to do stuff and get out of his comfort zone once in a while, and I feel like Ryan needs Min to guide his sort of energy in a more productive way. The book is called Duet, and these two people do really seem to, when they're not arguing at the moment, when they work out these issues, when they realize what they could mean to each other, I think they're actually like this potentially great partnership. They complement each other quite well, which is, again, I think one thing I will say is I could see somebody watching this season and feeling like these characters are a little inconsistent, and that their arguments and their situations don't track as neatly as other series. And I've talked about this in previous episodes, but I think actually it's pretty clever, because it's always on the same topics, but they're often sort of flip-flopping in how they feel about things. I mean, Min spent so many episodes telling Ryan very specifically, you need to be less you. Like, this impulsiveness is a problem. You need to wait. But we're showing the growth of the characters now, and it's a little more hard to track, maybe because it's a bit more complicated, because there's two of them, and they're both they have opposite situations, so they're both flip-flopping from each end of a spectrum to the other, and it's like a pendulum. It's like and they're going opposite directions, and that leads you into a situation where they become emotionally a little bit harder to track maybe than previous characters. But I actually like that complexity, and Ryan here sort of, so we have Min indicating that he could use with being a little bit more Ryan, and then Ryan less directly, more indirectly, sort of implying that he would have been better and his career would have been better if he'd had Min with him. So it's about these two getting in sync a little bit and communicating better. And then they have this moment where they talk about, where Min talks about his job, and he's like, you were right, it's pathetic. And he's like, I didn't say that. And he's like, yeah, but you meant it, which is just a great exchange that I've noted down because it's just really goddamn good. And I think Min feeling like Ryan's been off having it easy on tour also hits at another problem these two characters have, is beyond not communicating with each other, they're not empathizing with each other at all. They're so wrapped up in their own thoughts and feelings, they've not really been considering the thoughts and feelings of the other. And it keeps coming up in little ways, but like, again, Min feeling like Ryan's been off on tour having fun when it's clearly not been that for him. And he's just not paying attention by the sound of it. That's kind of rough, because you almost want him to, you just want him to understand. You want them both to understand what the other one is going through. And in sort of, I found it really interesting as well. Min sort of at one point says it, his parents are the ones that are happy for him to go to uni. But Ryan sort of, again, is like almost like the grass is greener thing. Ryan feels that at least Min's parents care. Ryan says he feels like he has to achieve something to get people to care, which kind of explains his drive. So it's like the parents are almost informing the drive of the characters to be the way they are. And they've not quite found themselves yet, which is another reason why this is all a bit muddled and complicated. And at one point, Min actually says, I don't know why I do anything, which I thought was like really insightful. Like he's conflicted. He's got his parents making so many influences on him, but he's so scared to make a move that he's not moving at all. And that's kind of what his parents want. They want him to just go to uni and let it be a finance guy or whatever. But he wants to have fun. Like he envies what Ryan has, but Ryan appreciates what Min has as well. That sensibility of, that sensibility, so it's, they both see something really interesting in each other. And I think as well, I thought it was really interesting that Min said that he, when he was left, it felt like Ryan doing what he always does, which again, Min left Ryan. So they keep coming back to this, and I think this is another point that I could imagine confusing someone or like not being very clear. But I think it's because from Min's perspective, Ryan running off to achieve things for himself, when he's just said, I don't know why I'm doing anything, that's Ryan getting ahead of him in life. That's Ryan doing a thing he wants to do. That's Ryan having the balls to make a choice and run with it, rather than stand on the spot and hope it works out. And it comes back to the Astro Q car. And I think that's really a strong position for these characters to be. That this season's become very difficult to talk about, I'll be honest, because I'm analysing these two characters. They both have these swinging positions, and it is contradictory in places, and it's kind of makes it really hard for me to analyse, if I'm honest. It's one of the more complex they've done, but I'm even the fact that I'm sat here sort of like going, well, he says this, but then he thinks this, and then it's like you feel like you understand the characters, but you also kind of don't. And that's kind of what I think is so appealing about this series. And then one of the things that I did sort of think was like, I don't know where this is coming from. He sort of says, I should trust you, but I don't, or something to that effect. And I'm not really sure what he meant by that, because if he was specifically referring to the events of the last episode, Ryan's communication skills are massively letting him down here, because Min sort of says, "You left me," and he's like, "I had the opportunity to leave you, and trust me, I didn't." Which I think is a little bit of a fudge, by the way, because he definitely thought about it, which is why the portal disappeared. But anyway, Min's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Don't worry about it, nothing." And it's another example of Ryan not actually telling Min how he feels, while Min is being so honest. Min's like, "I'm not sure I trust you," and he's just silent. And then he says something along the lines of like, I guess it wasn't the last car that made us say all that stuff, which I thought was also a really interesting tag to this whole thing, which is that maybe the last car influenced their mood and made them more open to being argumentative, but the stuff they were saying was coming from them. It was coming from within them. The car can poke or prod all it likes, and it, but it's stuff they were feeling, and stuff they were thinking. A little like the locket in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, that when Ron wears it, it makes everything he's thinking 10 times worse, and it makes him vocalize it. The Horcrux, sorry. So I don't know. The trust thing's really interesting, because I guess what this comes down to is he could and should trust Ryan, and the main reason he isn't right now is Ryan's not getting out of his own way and being honest with Min about how he feels. This is the other thing. I keep saying, well, that's rich from Min, saying that Ryan's always leaving him when we've visibly seen him leave Ryan twice now. Has Ryan ever voiced that? I said it myself in a previous episode. Ryan carried on. He picked up his guitar and he just kept doing it. Ryan's not being honest with Min when Min does something that upsets him. So Min has this impression of Ryan being this free spirit that doesn't give a shit, and he's all sad and broody and having to deal with it, and Ryan's just carefree, having fun. I think the minute Ryan starts being honest and communicating better with Min, the easier this is going to go. I think he kept his number, not being the same as his secret. I know I'm coming back to that. I know you guys are like, damn it, this is Tuber all over again. Dan banging a drum, planting a flag. That's probably not going to turn out to be true. But I am. The more I think about it, the more convinced I am. As I go through these episodes and I do the screenshots for these videos, I notice that they almost never do a shot of a character looking at their number without then doing the equivalent reverse shot of the number itself. Yet, 2 occasions in the big baby car, Min looked at his number and we saw it, and Ryan looked at his number and we did not. After that point when we saw Min's go up, I think they were different for sure. Whether the show goes that route as like an actual plot point, I don't know, but it just seems like Ryan keeps keeping stuff from Min. He's not being honest. No wonder Min doesn't trust him. Actually, I suppose that, yeah, maybe that does make perfect sense, that Min doesn't trust Ryan. Ryan's never telling him how he feels. It's now I think about it, it's been very one-sided, this series. Like, Ryan has occasionally told him the truth, but he's been way more surface than Min has. Min told him the thing about his anxieties regarding his race and whether that and how that would affect their ability to succeed in the music career. He's been honest about how he feels about his parents pushing him into stuff. He's been honest about how he feels about Ryan. Here he tells him that he's not sure he trusts him anymore, and that he feels like he's left him behind. I think when he says left him, I think he means kind of left him behind rather than physically left him. I guess he did physically leave him because he went on the tour, but again, I always kind of thought well, you chose that because you deliberately abandoned the gig. So that one's a little muddled, but I think in general, it makes a lot of sense. And now the more I think about it, the more I go, actually, yeah, this is really clear, because Ryan is just not talking and not explaining his situation. He's not told him that the numbers were different. He's not told him the door shut up. He didn't even really defend himself in this episode when Min was saying, you left me, and saying, look, I didn't know that's how the door would work, and I got stuck on the other side, and I physically couldn't get back. But I'm telling you, I was here banging on this perspex, whatever it is. I could see you struggling, and I desperately wanted to get to you, and I couldn't. And he can't bring himself to do it. So Ryan has an issue of his own. Maybe the lesson Ryan has to learn is to be honest and communicate with Min, and maybe the lesson Min has to learn is to maybe not put so much of his stuff on Ryan, and make Ryan the source of so many of his choices. he's the one choosing to stand still. Ryan isn't making him do that. In fact, Ryan was encouraging the very opposite. So I don't know. I sometimes I worry that like when I'm getting into this stuff, because I have trouble. Not trouble, but like because they're such good characters and they are quite complex. I feel like sometimes I'm sort of circling myself when I'm talking about this stuff because I'm still trying to figure out the nuances. So I'll spend a few minutes sort of saying sort of vague stuff that kind of makes sense to me, and then something will click and that'll feel a lot better. Like that stuff just then, but the stuff before it I wasn't. So the stuff about it, once I got to like the trust issue and that and hit on the notion that Ryan maybe isn't communicating as well, that felt really like an actual point, whereas I felt like I was circling the drain when I was just talking about some of the stuff they said. But anyway, moving on. So all that stuff is this episode, and I've spent an inordinate amount of time talking about it. So that's what I mean about the two readings. I didn't pick up any of that stuff from the first viewing of this episode. I understood that they'd had a conversation, and I took in a certain amount of character honesty from Min, and I did find it intriguing, that he kind of indicated that his parents were very much the ones who wanted to go to university, and he's almost envious of Ryan. I don't think I picked up on how one-sided it was until this conversation, this monologue, I should say, ramble log, whatever you want to call this, rambling review. There's still a lot for these characters to do, and I'm glad that we're 2 episodes left. I think pacing-wise, this is kind of perfect. 2 episodes now for them to really address their issues. So I'm on board with that. I think that's a really good thing. I also like the little detail that Ryan had been working on his music, his oeuvre, and he'd sent a cassette back to Min's family, and they'd been listening to it. That suggests almost, again, about Ryan kind of like seeking the approval of Min's parents, the parents who care more than his own parents, who he feels doesn't seem to care much. And we haven't... I think there's more to learn about that too, because that might kind of explain why Ryan's so... Maybe it's Ryan that has like a sick family member or some other thing happening in his life that's keeping him so quiet. Because I don't think, again, I had to go back through the whole season, but it does hit me now how much these conversations, these honest conversations, swing one way. The 2 that stand out to me most are this one and the one in the bathtub. And the one in the bathtub was, again, Min revealing a truth about himself and Ryan reacting. So, I'm again blown away by the writing in this show. It's very clever and way beyond what a normal kids show tackles. And as a result, it's kind of challenging, because I think that's the other thing as well. In a drama, you'd expect maybe this kind of complexity from characters and these kind of like sort of almost contradictions from characters. Because they have conflicting feelings about things. Animated shows, I guess, have simpler through lines, easier to track as a rule. And what I thought was interesting was last year's characters felt really complex as well, but they both went through very clear arcs, which made it a little bit easier to pass, I think, than this. Whereas this is a bit more muddled, intentionally so. I don't think that's a criticism. Just to clarify, I just think it's like designed to be a more like these are the 2 characters going through a period of time where they're very confused about how they feel. So as a result, it can feel a little bit like that. Really on board with this episode. That it was absolutely a blast. But also all that stuff. All that last like 10-15 minutes of me trying to pass what these 2 characters feel. Other details, have I got anything else? Have I tackled everything I wrote down? Oh no, we talked about the ending. Oh yeah, the ending. Alright, let's get there. Alright, come on. Alright, show. Morgan. Clever people. So, in the Old West episode, Kez shows a picture of a humanoid figure in the foreground, and they're in front of what looked to me like a monument of some sort. Well, it's a building, but it was like a landmark of some sort. And they were like, it was like they were on a holiday. It was like a holiday photo. We've come to see this castle. When they get to this car, there's a castle in the middle of it, and you think, oh, so that picture was Kez and Morgan in front of their home. They lived here for a bit, I guess. So maybe Morgan was a passenger that didn't travel so much through the car, but actually stayed in one car and learned his lesson somehow. Okay. Then the episode happens and they're going through the maze. Then they reach the castle, they get inside, and there's no human at all. And she's like, I'd like you to meet Morgan. And it's like, but where is Morgan? And then The torch is light, and a spooky voice comes out of the house, and the house is sentient, and the house is Morgan, and that other person is presumably, I don't know, third roommate from the past. I'm not sure yet. I think we'll find out. I don't think they're just gonna leave that open. I think that'll be answered. But the this like castle-like building is Morgan. Her roommate is Morgan, and Morgan does not seem happy that Kez is back. They may have fallen out. Maybe Kez feels more like Morgan's her roommate than Morgan feels like that. Maybe Morgan is sick of Kez but can't do anything about it because Morgan is a building. And maybe the maze was an attempt to keep Kez out and it was being built up taller. But they hadn't gotten that far before Kez returned. It's possible. I don't know. I was just annoyed at how clever it was because I was just like, it's literally, you just put it there. It's in a picture. It's it's when you know, you go, I kind of hate these writers for doing this because it's almost, it's too good, isn't it? It's like, it's one of those things that's so absurd you wouldn't think of it even if they literally showed you a picture of it in the 3rd episode. So, hey ho. What do you do with that information? Just like, absolute swines. So yeah, it's genius. I really like it. I kind of hate them, but I kind of love them, the writers for this. I think I messaged one of our listeners, Cram, when I saw this episode straight away and was like, god damn these guys. Like, I made that point very quickly, which is just like, they are. One second. My phone keeps buzzing. Chris is trying to video call me, but I'm gonna wait. Chris.
We never video called Dad.
Chris, you're on Infinity Train reviews. I'm not kidding. I'm recording right now.
I know. I assume you are.
Welcome to this podcast, Chris. How are you feeling?
Hey.
Say hi to the.
I'd like to think that you've done a little monologue of Chris is video calling me. He never video calls me, and I immediately looked at the phone, going, "We never video call."
I think I just said I'm getting a video call from Chris, and then there was a pause where I think the audience could audibly hear me deciding whether to answer now or not. I think that's what.
I'll be quick, and it sounds like this will work out for you anyway. I was just going to say, I thought we were recording at 1 and said I'd do a call as such, and then I've looked at the calendar and I'm like, oh no, we're recording at 12. We record at 1 instead.
I mean, I guess that's what we're doing. I mean, this was like 3-4 minutes from being done, so I timed it perfectly. You know, I'm on top of my life, Chris.
Well, fucking stretch it out, Dan.
No,
the audience can't see me take a really sassy swig of drink after saying.
No, they can't, but I can, and it's glorious. No, it's fine. I'll just have lunch in the 12 to 1 period, instead of the 1 to 2 period.
See you at 1.
See you then. Say goodbye to the listeners, Chris. And promise them you're going to at some point come onto this podcast because I've promised it several times that you're going to come talk about Infinity Train.
I promised we're going to do the Chris Dan Infinity Train extravaganza. Promise.
There you go, and that's what I'm going to call it, the Chris Dan Infinity Train extravaganza.
Please do.
There you go.
And find out all about Chris's weird fondness of tulip.
That's a great teaser. Cool.
That's creepier than I wanted it to, right?
I'm definitely leaving it in. See you, buddy. Bye. Oh, so Chris and me were recording in about 20 minutes for an analysing Avatar, and he's obviously just called to slightly delay that. His timing was perfect. And yeah, he has, when he watched season 1 of Infinity Train, he was like very attached to Tulip as a character. Like, it was kind of sweet. He was very invested in Tulip, but I thought that was very sweet. So yeah, we'll come back to that, I promise. Chris will at some point come on this podcast. So yeah, to wrap this one up, because what an odd episode this has been. Really into the way they've handled this with Kez. Where it goes from here, I don't know. I feel like the person in the picture is someone, and I feel like her relationship with Morgan might be antagonistic as a result, maybe, of that person. I feel like there's a chance that whatever her backstory is here with this is going to inform why she's been making an effort to keep Min and Ryan around. So yeah, I think that's all been, the groundwork of that has all been laid out really cleanly, and I think there's a lot of really cool stuff going on. So yeah, sorry this podcast went on maybe a little longer than it normally does. I don't know, I've lost track of time, and so I would apologize for the Chris interruption, but I think that's a nice little surprise. I wasn't expecting any video. Just a video call as well. What an idiot. I love him. Anyway, so thanks guys for listening. I mean, how do I end this otherwise? So we're just going to say thanks very much for listening, and I'll see you guys oh no, not tomorrow. I should actually clarify this. Tomorrow, I believe, is Rewind Reviews going up for Mr. Being the Ultimate Disaster Movie. And then we're going to do the final 2 episodes the days following that. So we got so it won't be tomorrow, it'll be 2 days from now. So yeah, so thanks very much for listening. I'll see you guys in 2 days when we sit down to discuss The Castle Car.